CFO.
Oh, thank you.
And I am,
Good morning, everybody.
all right, good morning.
Good morning, Hassan.
This is Mary.
Hi, Mary, good morning, how are you?
I'm good. I hope everybody's well.
Yeah, so I'm in the office today. James, can I mute myself, right?
Yes, I've made you give you that ability.
Okay, thank you.
And if you wish, Arthur or I are the only ones in the board meeting. You could have your seat, but you're also welcome to stay in your office upstairs.
I'm in the office. If I need you, I'll run. I know how to.
Deal.
And I'm all legal. I have my mask and my gloves. I just had to sign. I just saw Andrea have to sign some financial papers. So let me see, is it a long agenda today?
No, Ray Major's going to give his economic update. There's a couple of items, but it's not a very long agenda. And then you have your executive director's report.
Okay, all right. Thank you, James. I'm gonna stay on. I'll let you know if anything. And this one you could put picture too if you want to, right?
That is correct.
Okay. Right now it says Independent Taxpayer Oversight Committee, but I don't see my picture. Oh, I see my picture now. I'm looking good. Excellent. I see you too, James. How are you?
Doing well.
Where's your mask, buddy?
It's over there. Arthur and I are isolated by at least 20 feet. So.
I worry about you, James. I want you to be healthy. God knows we need you. So James, may I ask, how's the family doing with you working 24/7 these days?
My family's good. I have two grown sons. One of them just moved out a couple of weeks ago in the middle of this. So,
where did he move to?
Oh, he and his long-term fiance got a place together finally.
Oh, nice, nice.
The Army, came back, moved back in with us. Went to college, came back and moved in with us.
James,
came back.
I have a news for you. They come back. My son did it 3 times, and we're still waiting for the 4th time. They move out and they come back.
Yep.
And Mary, be ready for that. They always come back.
Yeah, my wife is
Yeah, Hassan, I'm not ready for that. In fact, I have an almost 20-year-old that I keep saying, when are you leaving?
Trust me, for a few months and then they'll come back.
Then I have a broken heart 18-year-old who's a senior going, I'm never leaving the house again, Mom.
Too comfortable for them.
Yeah, they're spoiled. They have a house here by themselves while I'm in San Diego, so they're kind of liking that.
You know, my son, when he finished college, find a job with AT&T, he was so excited to move out. And I was, like deep inside saying, okay, we'll see how this long lasts. And now we help him back, and he was so excited. 6 months later, he lost his job and calls me up. He said, can you help me? I'm back again. So what happened? He said, I'm coming back. I said, oh, okay, I expected that. It didn't last 6 months. That's twice already.
Well, my son's working at the airport and he's not getting many hours, as you can imagine nowadays.
Yeah. Which airport?
He works for Alaska.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, and he's in school full time, so I'm okay with that. As long as he's focusing on school, I'm good.
He's gonna fly, right?
Yep, he got his private pilot's examination delayed, of course, from all this, so he's bummed about that. But as soon as it's lifted, he's ready to take his exam in the air. So.
Yeah. Well, we'll get through it soon, I hope.
Yeah,
right?
we will. Absolutely.
News yesterday was really good. It was very
I wish
clear.
he was a little bit. I wish he was a little bit more clear. I just felt like he was repetitive and kind of a little mocky and muddy on his statement. Like we kept waiting, and I think finally 37 minutes into his speech, he finally said, "I got no date for you." So that was a little frustrating.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the reason I said it was very good, he pretty much not ready, and I don't think any leader is ready to say, okay, let's go back, let's open this and that, and then have people die and then be blamed for it. So he's being very careful. And I think he has a deal with the neighboring states, with Washington and Oregon. So,
Yeah, it sounds like they're all going to kind of do the same thing jointly, which is
yeah.
fine. I just, I hope in the end that that doesn't turn out to be that we really were acting a little hasty, and, no one will know until there's 100% testing how severe this is, if it's simply similar to the flu and we maybe overreacted, or if it's extreme and we did exactly what we should have done.
Well, I don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, we have to open the economy up. I mean, people's gonna die from hunger if
Absolutely.
I mean, there is 20 million already filed for unemployment.
Yeah, yeah. And not to mention, the small businesses. And even if we go into a state of what he spoke about with disposable gloves, half the restaurant only being available, throwaway menus. No, I mean, nobody's going to go to a fine dining restaurant and handle and manage that. So that has to really be considered as the real true economic impact. And that in itself might bring other sicknesses and elements around stress and around, the lack of socialism and all. I mean, it's just really a sad situation, and you do have to balance it. But when we balance it, we have to look not just at lives, because that is important, but also the overall economy and what that does to other people and their lives.
I agree. Well, like they say, we're gonna get to it. James, we're good to go?
Yeah, we're good to go. So the public is joining, so I would ask staff that are on the line already to mute yourself, and
Okay.
we'll announce when we're ready.
All right. And do we have public comments? Do you know?
Don't. Yeah, we'll ask. I don't see Tessa on yet.
Okay.
She'll be on shortly.
Mary, are you in San Diego or in Sacramento?
No, I'm still in Sacramento. I think we're going to drive down next week and work, hang out there a little bit just to make sure the condo's still standing, and everything inside the condo isn't rotten and smelly.
When you get here, call me. Let's talk about a couple of things.
Okay, sounds good.
Julie, do you want to give me a sound check? I see you're logged in both by computer and phone. I just want to make sure you can present. Okay, I sent you an audio pin. If you're connecting via the phone, use that pin to mute and unmute yourself.
Good morning.
Good morning, Ariana.
This is Tessa.
Oh, Tessa. I'm sorry.
Tessa, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Hassan. I'm fine. So, apparently, I did not invite the iTalk members to the webinar. So, I just registered all of them and sent them an email and let them know they've been registered. And so they should be logging on any minute.
Okay.
And there's 6 of them, James, not 5.
So, do they know that they got the email? Do we need to call them just to make sure?
I sent them emails. I've been in contact with them by email and sent them the link. I don't know. They're all online trying to figure out. I also sent them the appointment as well. So hopefully they've got all the information they need.
Okay.
Why does that make noise now? I'm going to turn the sound off on my computer. No, I can't do that, can I? I'm going to mute.
Julie Barajas, I sent you a pin so you could unmute yourself. I'd like to do a sound check before we start.
James, I can't see the attendees list. All I see is staff. Can you tell if any of the ITALK members are logged on? Okay, James is not logged on.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Uh-huh.
My mic was muted. Yes, I'm seeing people come on. I'm converting them now.
Okay, no need. The ITALK members can remain as attendees.
Yeah, just the
Just the chair. Kai Raymer needs to be an organizer. But I just need to know if they're actually on because I can't see.
Amberlynn, can we do a sound check with you?
I'm here. Can you hear me fine?
Perfect. And Chairman Raymer, I just sent you a pin so you can unmute yourself. And Julie, we still need to do a sound check with you.
Okay, can you hear me?
Absolutely, perfect.
Great.
Yeah, go ahead and mute yourself.
Okay.
When you're up, you can just unmute.
Tessa, can you hear me? Oh, nice.
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, who's that?
This is Julie.
Okay, yeah, we can hear you. You can
Okay,
go
so
ahead and
your email asking for cell phone numbers, they're in the
Yeah, hold
ITALK
on.
folder.
Okay, hold on. I cannot see the attendees portion because I'm a panelist, not an organizer. Oh, now I'm an organizer. Okay, I'm good. Thank you, James. So I can confirm who's on and who's not for the quorum. And
This is Kai. Are you able to hear me now?
Yes, we are.
Oh, okay. Okay, never mind. I won't go. I had issues.
Brad, I just sent you a pin so you can connect on your phone with the pin so we can hear you. Okay, I see Brad and Dustin and Greg.
This is
And
Kai.
Tracy.
When I had dialed in before I had a pin, I was challenged to get. I had to hang up and redial and then do the pin, and that worked.
Thanks for letting us know. Mr. Brad Barnum, you want to raise your hand? You want to do a sound check?
Yes, please.
Loud and clear.
Thank you.
Greg Sadowski has his hand up, James.
Mr. Greg Sadowski, you want to give me a sound check, please?
Yes, I do. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear. Thank you very much, sir.
Would you do a sound check with Tracy Drager, please?
Tracy? Oh, sorry.
Hi, this is Tracy.
Hi, Tracy. Loud and clear. Thank you.
Okay, it looks like we're just waiting on Stuart Halpern and Michael Kenny, the vice chair.
Welcome, Ariana. Would you give us a sound check, please?
For the LPP funding.
Yes, this is Ariana. Sorry, I'm on another call, so if you want to mute me for a minute.
Meeting at the end of
No
June
worries.
2024, the 25th. Standard will look into whether or not any.
Ariana, I muted you, so just just tell me when you are ready to be unmuted.
I see Vice Chair Michael Kenny is on. Would you please do a sound check with him, James?
Michael Kenny, can you give me a sound check, please?
Good morning, this is Mike Kenny.
Loud and clear, sir.
Yeah, we need to update that.
Tessa Stewart just said he'll be joining.
Stuart?
Thank you, Hassan.
Sound check, please.
I
Hello?
said,
One more time, please.
Hello?
Yep, hear you. Loud and clear. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi there, James. This is Ariana, just doing the sound check. Good
Hi,
morning.
Ariana. Oh, loud and clear. Are you going
Thank
to
you.
kick us off at 9:30?
Well, I can, or I can leave that to the chair. I believe he will be ready to do that. So it looks like we have Chair Raymer, and I'm not sure who we have from the ITALK, but I've heard
All members are present.
all members are present. Okay, fantastic. Okay, so
It's not quite 9:30.
correct. Thank you. Tessa, do we also have Tracy Drager?
Yes. And,
Okay, great.
and Chair Raymer, it is 9:30. You can begin your meeting whenever you're ready. You do.
Okay, thank you. Assuming you can hear me fine, right?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay. All right, well, it looks like everybody's here, and we'll call the meeting to order. Welcome to our first attempt at a teleconference meeting of the ITALC. Thanks to everybody on the phone for figuring it out and taking the time to join. It looks like we have our full committee, which is great. And then the staff, you guys have been great in terms of all the efforts pulling this together, from the trainings. I know the things that I've gone through, the guys' work has been great in setting this up. So looking forward to it. Looking forward to it working well. I'm sure we're going to have, some things might be a little slower or methodical, and just bear with us on that. We'll get through it, I think, fine. I think it seems like a really good system that's set up. So before we jump into the meeting agenda, the meat of the meeting, I think I'd like to ask the clerk to confirm that we have a quorum. I'm pretty sure we do, but is that Tessa?
Yes, we have a quorum with all 6 members, and Tracy, the advisory member, are present.
Okay, thank you. And then, because this is a new process, we'd like to ask Amberlynn Griffin, the legal counsel, to go over some basic instructions for not only the committee members, but also members of the public that would like to comment today, and how the system works. So, before we dive into the agenda, I'll turn it over to legal counsel briefly.
Good morning, and thank you, Chair. First, for our committee members, if you have a question or a comment, or you would like to make or second a motion, please click on the raise hand icon at the top right of the screen. When the chair sees that, he will call on you. Everyone's microphone will be muted by default, and this is very important to remember. Please don't touch the microphone icon. The chair will be able to see on his screen a list of all committee members who have raised their hands, and will call on you at the appropriate time, and then you will be unmuted. When that happens, your microphone icon at the top right of your screen will turn from red to green. Again, please do not click on the microphone icon yourself. If you mute yourself, we cannot unmute you. After your motion or your comments, you will be muted again, and the chair will proceed to the next committee member in line. For each item that is on the agenda, the chair will call on staff to present the item. You will see their PowerPoint slides or an action item slide on your screen. After each presentation, we will take public comment, which will be described in just a moment. Committee members can then ask questions or offer comments on the item by raising their hands. As before, the chair will call on members who have raised their hands and unmute each individually. If you would like to make a motion or to second a motion, please raise your hand. The chair will recognize you in the same manner as for questions or comments, and your microphone will be unmuted to make or second the motion. As for voting, by state law, all votes in a teleconference must be by roll call vote. After there has been a motion and a second, the clerk will call for the vote of each committee member individually, and that member will be unmuted to vote. At the conclusion of voting, the clerk will announce the result. Also, for clarity of the record, please identify yourself each time you speak. As we go through this new process, we'll likely be going a bit slower than normal. As for members of the public, we have asked that public comments be emailed to the clerk of the board in advance of today's meeting. Those comments that were sent by 4 p.m. yesterday were provided to you in advance of today's meeting. The public can also email comments during the meeting. Those comments should be sent to clerk, C-L-E-R-K, @sandag.org, identifying the item number to which the comments pertain and the name of the commenter. At the conclusion of each presentation, the clerk will then read all comments that were submitted during the meeting. Mindful of the number of items today and the need to keep a quorum, the chair has set a limit of 1 minute per comment. If a comment takes more than this time to read, Only the first minute will be read, but the entirety of the comment will be made part of the meeting record. That includes the instructions, and staff will remain available to assist with any technical issues that may arise.
Okay, so that concludes your remarks there. Sorry.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Emberlyn. With that, I think we're set to dive in, and we will start with item number 1 on our agenda, which is approval of the meeting minutes from our February 12th, 2020 ITAC meeting. So I guess I would be looking for, well, any comments on the minutes, or alternatively, motion to approve the minutes. Call on Stuart Halburn.
Chair, this is the clerk. I wanted to let you know there are no public comments on this item.
Oh, okay. I skipped that, didn't I? Thank you. Call on Stuart. Has his hand raised?
Can you hear me?
Yes, thanks.
Yeah, Stuart Alvin, I move to approve the minutes.
Okay, thank you. Michael Kenny.
I'd like to second the motion.
Okay, any further comment? Not seeing any. I will call on the clerk for a roll call on the vote of the motion.
Let me make sure I'm muted. Chair Raymer?
Approved.
Michael Kenny, Vice Chair Kenny? Sorry, I have my glasses on.
Approve.
Brad Barnum?
Approve.
Dustin Fuller?
Approve.
Stuart Halpern?
Approve.
And Greg Sadowski?
Approve.
The minutes are passed unanimously.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to item 2. Are there any public comments to be read into the record?
We do not have any public. Sorry, we do not have public comments on this.
Okay, moving on to member comments. Any members of the committee like to offer any comments related to items not on the agenda? If so, raise your hand on. Okay, not seeing any. We will move, no, it doesn't appear there's any comments. So we'll move on to item number 3, Executive Director's Report. I see we have Hassan in attendance. I'll turn it over to you, Hassan. Hope you're doing well.
Thank you, and you too. And it's so good to talk to all of you, and hope you're healthy with your families. And thank you for working with us to have the meeting happen. And thank you, Chair Raymer. A couple of things that are important to update you on. The SANDAG team has been teleworking for more about a month now. And I want to report to you that I couldn't be prouder of the 400 people that work here. That over the weekend we transitioned from all working in the agency to teleworking. The IT team has been amazing. When I joined SANDAG 15 months ago, we had 5 laptops agency-wide. In the last 3 weeks, James and his team managed to get us about 300. Every Sandag employee now have access to a computer, mostly Sandag laptop with all the softwares needed to do their jobs. I'm also happy to report to you that we have not missed any deadline. Our construction projects are moving forward as scheduled. As a matter of fact, the mid-coast is accelerating a few things because of the light traffic and light trail services. All the other projects in the region are moving as scheduled with all the precaution and the distancing in place. 90% of our staff are working from home. There's about 10% who need to be on site. The tolling operation, some of the finance people here at the office. But when in the office, and I don't know whether you can see me, we all are required to wear a gear of mask and gloves and continue the social distancing that's required. Safety and security of the staff are #1 priority for me. This has been, we were probably the first public agency to close to the public out of precaution. It was an easy decision to make, but we did have concern, how do we get 400 people working? And James and his team made that very easy, too easy actually. Productivity is up. We held 2 board meetings last week, the second one, and did business as usual. And we are out there. You probably read and hear and listen and see on the news, trying to do everything we can as an agency to help the region get through this. Earlier this month, our iCommute team hosted 2 webinars that were actually better attended than ever on telework. Today, if you open the newspaper, the Union, you will see the first page. On the first page, Ray Major's forecast, economic forecast, which you're going to hear about today. If your organizations or companies in your jurisdiction need help starting or expanding a telework program, the Sandag iCommute program is here to help you. You can reach us by calling 511 and saying iCommute. Just remind the committee members that in 2014, we received a federal grant to do a pilot in telecommuting. We were planning to get 10 employers to participate in a pilot. Unfortunately, we could only get 4. I think given this COVID-19 pandemic, things are changing, and we're repurposing and redirecting the iCommute to work with employers throughout the region to make sure that some of the telecommuting that's happening today because of the COVID-19 pandemic continues on. Our hope is more of us will telecommute in the future, because that's a sure way to reduce emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, vehicle mile travel. That will for sure help us meet our requirement. While we are, our offices remain closed to the public, a few essential employees in Toll Operations Center are continuing to take customer phone calls and ensure safety and maintenance of the roadway. We're following all the social distancing we need to. We continue to monitor and follow federal, state, and county guidelines in our effort to stem the spread of the virus and flatten the curve. Our chief economist, Ray Major, has developed an economic forecast for the region based on key indicators in many different tax markets. I am proud to tell you that Ray, who's the top in the nation, becoming a spokesperson for the economic situation in the region. He has been in many TV channels, talked to many newspapers and reporters, and he he has done more in the last 2 weeks than a normal person will do in a year to try to figure out the impacts of this in the region at large and on us at Sandag here. If condition continues as is, we at Sandag expect to see around 15% drop in our tax revenues. Ray will go over, this is not the worst case scenario, but this is the scenario that we're moving forward to develop the budget today. If you may recall from my previous decisions, 15% budget of 1.36 billion is a large percentage. We took some action, and you heard me report on this, that we are and started the plan of reducing the workforce, the payroll workforce, by 10% or about 50 positions. And we are going to accomplish that. And that will be part of the budget that we're going to present to the board on May 18th, the draft budget. We also going to repurpose, and we started that, many of our employees to make sure that the work does not suffer from the lack of hiring this position. Sandag continue to be a regional leader in forecasting, and Ray will update the forecast regularly. And today you're going to hear from him, and I'm sure you're going to, as I did, enjoy what he has to tell us. Again, we are right now in the midst of preparing a draft budget. We had a discussion with the board of directors last week. Our budget has to be balanced, but we also committed to do a quarterly budget this year because of COVID-19, given that we are not going to be able to know the full impact by the time we adopt the budget. So we will do our best to incorporate as much as we know, and then 3 months later, we'll come back to the budget and to the board for an update. This is not easy. This is difficult. Obviously, most of our employees, we try to communicate with them as often as possible. Things are moving as planned. I want to thank my senior executive team and the whole executive team, the IT, HR, the emergency response, for doing an amazing job to keep the agency moving forward. Couple of other items on the legislative update. As you know, the governor made it very clear that the budget that they started in January is no longer valid. They're going to go back to the drawing board. The legislators are not going to pick up any bill that's not COVID-19 related. One of our bills, 2062, which deals asking money for the Dilmar Bluff, is not going to be moving forward. But one bill we hope to move forward is the CEQA streamlining on the NAVWAR site. That's authored by Assemblymember Todd DeGloria and principally authored by Senator Pro Tem Atkins. We also hearing about a lot of stimulus coming from Washington. As good news, as part of the first stimulus, we received $310 million to be given to our 2 transit agencies. And that's good news. That should make them whole for the rest of the year and not allow them not to do layoffs. But as part of the bigger stimulus that's been talked about, some people say $1.5 trillion, $2 trillion. Our staff are ready right now to compile a list of projects to be submitted. I believe we're going to be successful in competing with the rest of the nation for whatever stimulus. I think this is important for our region. It's important for putting people back to work. It's important for continuing all the great projects that we're doing. We ask our cities and counties if they feel there is a project related to the business we are in, and they feel that we did not include it in the list, to please submit one. So it's yet to see when the stimulus, but it all talk pointing to a big stimulus infrastructure budget coming in. The regional transportation plan. We were ready to present, to unveil the vision back in March 27th. Obviously, we couldn't. We thought we were going to do it April 3rd, and we couldn't. So I went back to the board and spoke to the transportation committee and asked that the vision presentation be delayed until we can get back together so the public has the benefit of seeing what the board is going to be seeing. But that doesn't mean that the work is not continuing. The plan is scheduled to be adopted end of 2021. We are on schedule, and you will be impressed with what your team here at Sandag putting forth as a vision. Speaking to a few reporters in the last week or so, some ask whether your thinking about the vision is going to change or what this will do. And my answer is simple. It's too early to tell. But the work we do span multi-decades. And the vision, I think, it's still intact when it comes to that. Now, some reporter would ask, well, will people ever take transit again because of this COVID? Well, you know, and my answer is, will people stop going to baseball games or basketball games or concerts or restaurants? I think this will have an impact. We don't know what it is yet, too early to tell. But judging by history, people behavior go back to the most convenient things they do. And I just give you a couple of examples. I was in Los Angeles in 1984. Granted that it's a shorter period, 2 weeks. LA saw the best traffic ever since people start recording traffic. The Monday after the Olympic, LA went back to normal. Through history, when fax machine was discovered, we thought we're going to stop traveling. The opposite happened. This is, granted, is different, and depending how long it lasts, might be different. But our hope is that some employers like Sandag, and from both public and private sector, will allow their employees to telecommute at least some of the time, if and we're going to work with them to do that. Our vision is going to reflect that. But the vision that's been developed with the same ideas, provide choices, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, reduce vehicle mile travel, meet the federal and state requirement. And I'm very proud of the planning team that's working on this. The Del Mar Plus update, with the recent rain around the county, there have been no reported issues, thank God, on the Del Mar Prof. We will continue to monitor the situation. On the 2020 census, April 1st was Census Day. To comply with the stay-at-home orders, efforts have been focused on digital outreach and phone banking. The message remained safe and easy to complete the 2020 census safely at home, online, by phone, or by mail. About 50% of people in the San Diego region have completed the census so far, which is better than the statewide average of 46.2%. However, we still think we have room for improvement. I just want the committee member to know that we want to be doing what we can to ease the pain of this pandemic. And I know there is pain, and you're going to hear from Ray, especially the economic pain. But your agency here is hard at work to make sure that this region stand ready to benefit from any recovery packages coming from DC. And please let us know if there is anything that you think we should be doing. Also, tell us whatever you plan to do even before the COVID-19, we still can do it remotely. We have the technology now to have meetings, and we did. to have board meetings, public meetings, and we're continuing to do all of that. So with that, Mr. Chairman, and that concludes my report. I'll be very happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Hassan. Thanks very much for your report. Before we call on any members with questions, I'd like to first ask the clerk, are there any public comments on this item?
There are no public comments on this item, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any of the members have any questions or comments for the executive director? Not seeing any hands. He must have been very thorough. Oh, there's one. Stuart. Let's see.
Stuart,
Can I have? Oh.
You're on.
Thank you, Hassan. And I would also just say my own experience is the organization has been doing a great job making do and setting up meetings like this, what have you. So kudos to you and everybody in the organization. But the question I had relating to the regional plan, the 5 big moves, et cetera, is even before this, there was a tremendous amount of controversy about or at least political controversy about, let's just call it sort of transit versus highway. And I'm curious, as this moves forward, to sort of help with the comfort factor vis-a-vis the world, you know, going back to in which people are in fact going to be taking transit. Is there any kind of task force to be doing the kind of out of the box thinking about what kinds of things might be implemented, whether it's, you know, you have to pass through something to get your temperature taken before you get on a trolley, or, you know, things of that nature that people can imagine might be a part of a different world in taking transit going forward? Is that something people are thinking about working on?
Yes, and researchers start, you know, transit has been hit really hard in the country, in the whole nation. I know in some cases, like New York, the 90% of the subway riders are lost. In Los Angeles, our ridership went down 70% here in San Diego. So obviously, and just to be clear, this is absolutely expected because people are scared of the pandemic, and rightly so. And following our leaders' orders, we shouldn't be in the crowded places, including in transit. But obviously, we're going to get out of this, and I'm hoping we get out of it soon, and we're going to be stronger for it. And measures have to be in place to ease the fear. But, you know, after 9/11, we continue to fly, granted that we have to take our shoes now and be searched, etc. I believe the issues about whether people take transit just because of the pandemic is going to be here for a while. I think transit ridership in the country and the region is going to suffer for the next year or so. But this will not be a long-lasting impact, simply because you're most likely to be in a more crowded places, in a baseball game or a basketball game or in a restaurant for a longer time than you are in a transit vehicle. So a lot of education have to take place. And also, if it comes to, and there is no vaccine, I think some kind of testing has to be taken place. And like, for example, let us say our governor and our local county tell us you need to go back to work, say middle of May, which I don't know, but I'm just saying, hypothetically speaking. I will be very, very reluctant to bring the workforce back unless I see some kind of guarantee that some people who have the virus is not going to be working for the safety of themselves and the others. So something has to happen, and people start talking about, you know, is there devices where companies of certain size could have that could quickly test the antibodies, etc. And that's no different for transit. I think something has to happen, at least for the next year, to ease the concern of people using transit. As to your point, Stuart, on the vision, we have never subscribed to this philosophy that this is transit versus highway. We're talking about the transportation system. I know the politics has been trying to get us there, but we would never be successful if we think of transportation as such. It has to be a transportation system with all of its components. Transit, highway, biking, telecommuting, and we're hoping, very much hoping, and we're going to put some resources into maybe getting few percentages more for employers around the region to continue to telecommute. But that's a great question, Stuart, and researchers throughout the country has been looking at what can you do to ease the loss of transit ridership, because if the ridership continue to decline, this is dangerous for transit in general.
Thank you.
Great questions, too.
Thank you. Any other members have a comment or question on this item? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much, Hassan, for taking the time and going through items with us.
Of course. I just want the committee member to know I'm in my office and it feels like a ghost town here. I have to tell you, it's just, I know it's hard on all of you and your families. It's hard on the Sandak family, and we're gonna try to ease it, but it's hard for everybody here. But as a society, we're gonna work together to get out of this. And I will tell you honestly, I have never been prouder of a team that I worked with like I'm with this team, and the professionalism, the ability for them to create. And James, who is here in the boardroom and downstairs, has been with his team working 24/7. So in your behalf, I want to thank them and thank James and his team.
All right, thank you very much. I appreciate everything you guys are doing. Okay, this moves us on to item 4, which is the consent agenda, which is made up of one item, which is the annual regional transportation congestion improvement improvement funding program, where we are asked to accept the Regional Transportation Congestion Improvement Program funding submittals in accordance with our ordinance. If a member would like to pull this item from consent or have any questions, please raise your hand and I'll call on you. Let's see. If not, I'd like to ask the clerk if there are any public comments on the consent item.
There are no public comments on item 4.
Okay, thank you. So I asked if anybody had any comments. Absent any comments, I'd be looking for a hand raise for a motion to approve the consent agenda item. Call on Michael Kenny.
It's Mike Kinney. I'd like to make a motion to accept the consent calendar.
Okay, do I have a second? I call on Greg first.
I call for a second.
Okay, thank you. So I have a motion and a second. We call on the clerk for a roll call vote.
Chair Raymer?
Approved.
Vice Chair Kenny?
Approved.
Brad Barnum?
Approved.
Dustin Fuller?
Approved.
Stuart Halpern?
Approved.
Greg Sadowski? This item passes unanimously.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's move on to item 5 under reports, which is an update of the sales tax revenues. And I call on Ray Major to present the item. Is Ray here and ready?
I am here. Good morning, iTalk members. As soon as the presentation comes up, I will start. As many of you have probably heard me say in the past, all forecasts are wrong, some forecasts are useful. And the times that we're living in today have really proven out that all forecasts that have been done to date, no matter who did them, are wrong. And what we're doing right now is working on producing forecasts that are useful to try to understand a very fluid and dynamic situation. Next slide, please. These really are, I just want to start out by saying these really are unprecedented times. We've never seen the economy shut down the way that we have in the last month ever before. And the data that comes out is truly unrecognizable, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that throughout this presentation because it's one of the things that make it so difficult to really forecast. And so it is too early for us to really tell what the true ramifications are going to be of this COVID pandemic, but I will assure you that we will be working at coming up with forecasts of TransNet sales tax revenue, taxable retail sales, and other important variables for the San Diego region. I think the one thing that we need to take just remember is that this is a man-made disruption. This is not something that is a normal economic cycle. Even like with the Great Recession, there was a reason that we went into the Great Recession. The entire sector of the economy, the banking sector, the financial sector imploded, and so there was significant impacts on the economy. With this particular recession, it's man-made. We basically pulled the car over to the road and we turned off the key, and we can start it up again, but how we start it up is extremely critical. And those are the factors that I'm looking at every day. There are 3 factors that are going to influence how deep this how much revenue we lose from this particular pandemic. But the 3 factors that we're looking at are the length of the disruption. And you know, there's been some good news recently. We heard that the curve's flattening. We hear that you know, in some places maybe we're past the peak. So these are really good signs. And then we hear the federal government saying things like, we're going to be reopening by May 1st, but there's really no defined plan as to how we're going to open up. If you listen to Governor Newsom's speech yesterday, what you heard was a lot of unanswered questions that need to be answered before we can even consider opening up. And if you just kind of read between the lines there, it doesn't look to me like that's a May 1st opening. So the length of disruption and the fact that there's no information on when we actually open is extremely important. So that's one of the factors we're monitoring closely. The second one is the depth or the severity of the impending recession that's going to be caused by this downturn. You know, in a month ago, the economy was extremely strong. We had record unemployment levels. Employers were out there trying to hire people. There weren't enough people to fill the open vacancies. And you know, things have significantly changed. How deep of a recession we go into is going to have a lot to do with our ability to collect sales tax. You know, about half of our economy is made up from jobs that require, just by their very nature, social interaction. And so there are things like the services sector. So how those go back to work is going to be really important, and whether they can go back 100% is going to determine the depth of this recession. And the following is, and the last thing is the shape of the recovery. I don't know what the shape of the recovery is going to be. You heard a lot of economists talking about a V-shaped recovery. A V-shaped recovery would be one where we went into a downturn and quickly popped back out of it. And at the beginning of this, we thought we were going to have kind of a 14-day quarantine, And so that was a very, it was a good guess in terms of what the shape would be. We've been looking at something that is potentially longer than that. We're calling it a long V recovery. And today, Forbes had an article talking about the fact that this is going to be longer than a V recovery. So I think we are right on the money with that. It's too early to develop one scenario in terms of what the sales tax revenue is going to look like. So what we did is we developed a series of multiple scenarios that we update all at the same time. We're actually running 50 different scenarios based upon the 3 critical factors that I described. And each one of them gives us a different amount of loss in sales tax revenue, and then we apply a probability distribution to that to try to understand what the most likely scenario is given the data that's out there. Next slide, please. This, and I'm sure you've seen this graph. This is initial jobless claims through a couple of weeks ago. At the peak, the most we ever had in this country was 661,000 jobless claims, and that was at the height of the Great Recession. Click, please. Next. We now saw that on April 4th, over 6.6 million people applied for unemployment, and that brings the total as of last week to 16,789,000 Americans who filed for unemployment. This is absolutely unprecedented, and trying to forecast or draw any type of conclusions from this right now is really too early. The one thing that I wanted to point out on this slide, though, is like, how does this impact San Diego? Which sectors got hit the hardest? So what we did is we took a look at the different economic sectors in San Diego. You know that I've presented to you before, and the military, tourism, and the innovation sectors are the 3 big sectors that drive the San Diego economy. The sectors that are going to get hit the hardest include one of those sectors, which is tourism. Tourism is going to be decimated, would be my way of describing it, over the next year. Retail, restaurants, real estate will also be hit. The entertainment industry will be hit hard. Anywhere like shopping malls or enclosed places where people have to congregate, those are going to be hit hard in terms of taxable retail sales, and anything that would require personal services. That accounts for about 34% of the employment here in San Diego. The other 66% seems to be in a position where it would be able to weather this storm a little better. And those would include industries like the healthcare industry, education, military, the government, software, biotech, for instance. Utilities and transportation will do okay. And any type of professional services like accountants, financial advisors, engineers, they can work remotely. That's about 66% of the economy. 34% of the economy being hit is a big hit for us. I just want to point that out. But we are relatively well diversified, and I think that's going to bode well in the long run for the San Diego region. Next slide, please. This is a slide that was put together by Goldman Sachs, and it shows the gross domestic product, the GDP, and how it reacted during the last recession. This is the Great Recession. You see we're down about 9%. If you hit the slide again, please. You see that their projection right now is that we will be down 24% in the third quarter of 2020. They've revised that number, and they're now at 30%. There are other forecasting firms that are saying down 35%. The good news is that all of these firms are looking at a rebound either in late 2020 or in early 2021 when the economy opens back up. So I think that's something we need to also take into account. We have a very strong economy. Fundamentally, there was nothing broken. How we come out of the next couple of months is going to be extremely key on what our recovery looks like. Next slide, please. Just to remind you, this is the TransNet sales tax revenue forecast that we brought to the board of directors a couple of months ago. This is the number that was revised based upon the new Department of Finance figures that adjusted the population down to 3.7 million. So our anticipation, this is in year of collection dollars, was that we would collect approximately $18.1 billion over the life of the TransNet program. We've collected 2.8 billion so far. There's still 28 years left. Okay, so there's a lot of time for us to be able to collect sales tax revenue. Will we be hit in the short term? Absolutely. Will we suffer long-term damage from this? Probably not significantly, given the amount of time we have left, unless there's fundamental changes in society that last in the order of decade. Next slide, please. I just wanted to give you a brief understanding of what recoveries look like from recessions, because we use these as the foundation for some of the forecasting that we did. When you take a look at the 1991 recession, that is a recession that we would consider to be a moderate recession. The blue line here shows you the sales tax revenue collection from TransNet. So that's what this graph is looking at. And what you'll see is that it took us, in year of collection dollars, almost 4 years to recover the amount of money that we were making from TransNet because of that moderate recession. So revenues dipped in 91, 92. They started to recover in 93. And then, so that's what we look at as a moderate recession. The 2001 was kind of a mild recession. That was the one after the dot-com boom. You see that we really didn't lose any revenue in real dollar terms. What did happen, though, is that our rate of increase slowed. The Great Recession brought on a significant decrease in sales tax revenue. It took us 6.5 years in real dollar terms just to get back, in year collection, sorry, to get back to where we were in 2008. It took us another 4 years to get back to trend. So it's about a 10-year recovery from the Great Recession, and this is what we would look at as a severe recession. Next slide, please. So we've done some primary research. We have information from our vendors. We're calling the top 100 contributors to sales tax revenue to really understand how this is impacting the businesses that are out there. We monitor 28 different sectors. 17 of the sectors are presented here on this slide. When you take a look at this, you see who got hit hard. Okay, these are the sectors that we collect sales tax from. So retail, for instance, got hit hard as of the end of March. Apparel, department stores, furniture stores, etc. You see that food markets and liquor stores were actually up. Restaurant sales were down. The transportation industry was hit really hard. A lot of the auto dealerships have closed their doors. You see 75% or 80% decreases in new car sales. That translates directly into revenue for us. Service station revenue is down too, because people are, not only are they not buying as much gasoline, but the price is cheaper now. So that's kind of a double hit on revenue that comes from service stations to the TransNet bottom line. A couple of bright spots, including the food market, is miscellaneous retail, which includes the Amazon sales or online sales. That one's very hard to predict, but we've seen a surge in that. We're getting more information in, so these numbers are going to be revised soon. But these are what we're looking at in terms of impact by sector. Next slide, please. Please click. And click one more time. So what this graph is showing is our sales tax revenue historically from 1997 through 2019. And you see that the Great Recession, there is that little dip. And the light blue lines kind of show a forecast of what could have been if we were going to continue to collect at the rate that we were collecting. So that's just an extrapolation over the next 10 years. What I'd like to show you on this slide is what is the impact to taxable retail sales in the region. It's important because this funds a lot of, this isn't just Sandag, this is also some of the local governments also get sales tax revenue. So this is going to directly impact them. Click please, James. If all we did was have a 2-month disruption in the economy, and we had what would we consider a kind of a moderate recession with a V-shaped recovery, what would happen is that you would see that in 2020 and 2021, we would probably lose some revenue. and retail sales, and then we would come back to baseline. The loss in that particular case would be about $10 billion of loss in retail sale. Click, please. If the shutdown was extended to 3 months, you see that that number would jump to almost $16 billion. So this is a 3-month disruption with a V-shaped recovery. Next slide, please. Irene, can you mute your phone, please? You keep coming up as static. The third scenario I wanted to share with you is what would happen if we didn't have that V-shaped recovery that economists are kind of hoping for, and that we have something that's more like a U-shaped recovery. So a U-shaped recovery would be one that has a bottom for a little while, and it takes us a while to figure out how we're going to get out of it. The reason that I bring up the U-shaped recovery is that a lot of the indicators I'm looking at right now are really pointing towards, yes, we can open the economy. No, we have no idea how we're going to come back to work. All we know is that restaurants won't be able to sit people as closely. So all of a sudden capacity goes down by 50%. Can a restaurant even stay in business with those type of new regulations? What happens in terms of retail? Will we still be queuing up in lines to get into a Walmart, or is that going to be lifted? If it takes us a while as a society to get back into the role of things, and this is actually from a national perspective, it would translate. It would take us longer to come out of the recession, and so we would lose a significantly larger amount of sales tax revenue, probably $36.5 billion. Next slide, please. And just for comparison's sake, what I wanted to put up here is what would it look like if we model what happened during the Great Recession. If we have something like the Great Recession, where we went into a deep economic downturn and it took us a decade to get out of it, which is very similar to what happened with the Great Recession, we'd see that we would lose almost $110 billion in sales tax revenue. The reason I wanted to show you this is look at the range. It goes from $10 billion if we pop back up quickly to $110 billion if we can't figure this out, and it's more like the Great Recession, which we all just recently lived through. So a lot of very critical decisions are going to be made between now and the next couple of months in terms of how the economy is going to react to that long term, and that's what's really going to determine how bad this recession is going to be for us in terms of taxable retail sales and sales tax revenue. Next slide, please. One more click. This shows you our TransNet. This is specifically TransNet. The last slide was looking at taxable retail sales. This is specifically our TransNet sales tax revenue forecast. And we had a pretty much a straight line forecast coming out of 2020. There was no reason for us to really work any recession or anything into it. So now if you click once, this shows what would happen to our TransNet revenue if we were shut down for the 2 months and pop back to baseline. We would lose about $28 million. I do not believe that this scenario is valid anymore. 2 weeks ago, this would have been the most likely scenario. Now this probably is not going to happen. Next, click. If it takes us a little longer to get out of the work at home stay orders, if we're back to work by June 15th, we would lose about $52 million in sales tax revenue. If you click again, if it takes us even longer to get out, so this would be a 3 month disruption, but it kicks us into a severe recession. I wanted to show you what would happen. And we come out of it with a U-shaped recovery. We could lose as much as $203 million in sales tax revenue. Click again. For comparison's sake, again, this is what the Great Recession would look like. We would lose somewhere on the order of $500 million or maybe more. And if you click one more time, just so that people can see, this is what the Great Depression looks like. There would be a loss of 1.2 billion. Now, I don't believe that either the Great Depression or the Great Recession are realistic scenarios. We put them there just to show you the impact. A lot of people, if you read some of the news stories, are saying, you know, this is the next depression. I just wanted to show you what that would look like. I think we're very far from that right now because of where the inflection point is and because of the fact that the economy is not fundamentally broken. So really the scenarios that we're looking at right now kind of take us again from that $28 million loss to a $203 million loss as a potential. Next slide, please. Quick. And one of the things that we did, so we do this bottom-up forecast. We took a look at all of the different industries. We tried to understand how they were impacted, and we came up with the numbers that we shared with you. What I'd like to show you now is how our numbers compare to national forecasts. And this is a practice that we've been doing since the last couple of years, where we look at independent forecasts and we compare ours to see like how we look in relative terms. So if you click again, this particular forecast shows the Oxford Economics forecast that came out on 3/20. They thought that the economy was going to dip about 2%. Now, let me just say that what we had to do is to take national level forecasts that are usually looking at calendar year quarters, and we had to apply those to our sales tax revenue forecast. So there's math involved in making these match our forecast. Next click shows the IHS forecast. They were down 5%. Next click, the UCLA forecast was also down 5%. The Moody's forecast was down 7%. Next click, Wells Fargo also down 7%. Click again. Goldman Sachs is down by 11%. Click one more time. Deloitte's forecast came in minus 13%. All of these forecasts have been revised downward in the last week. We haven't included them in the slide deck yet because they're just coming out in the last couple of days. Click one more time. This is the revised Goldman Sachs one, and then one more time. This is the Sandag forecast that we're using right now. So what you can see for planning purposes, this is the number that we were using, and it's right in the middle of what these national forecasts are showing. So from my perspective, our forecast is doing relatively well. It compares with some of the national forecast very reasonably. Next click, please. And this is what it would look like if it took us longer to come out. And I'm leaning more towards this scenario this week as time goes on, that we're moving in this direction. Click one more time. This particular slide talks about TransNet revenue and when the collections actually come in. The reason I wanted to show you this is that we work in a fiscal year. We don't work in a calendar year, obviously. All of the information that you hear on the news is calendar year. So we're talking about how bad second quarter and third quarter are going to be of 2020. Well, when we take a look at that and we compare it to fiscal year, there's also a couple other adjustments that we need to make. One is that we get our sales tax collection 2 months delayed from the state of California. So if you take a look at February collections, you see that there's a big tall bar there. Those collections were high because those are actually the money that came in December, which includes the holiday sales. Okay, so in April, on April 21st, we will receive a check for our February receipts. So we're expecting that to be relatively normal, just like it would have been before the coronavirus hit. The check that we get in May will reflect the activity in the economy in March, and that's the first one that's really going to start to be impacted. Our forecast starts to look at about March 15th as the day where we started to shut down the economy, depending upon what sectors. The June numbers will look very bad because they will be reflective of April collections, so this month that we're in right now. And that would be all translated into 2020 revenue. Now, we were doing well at the beginning of 2020. We were a little bit ahead of plan, and so these numbers will have an impact on 2020 revenue, but they will be tempered by the fact that we collected well in the first half of the year. As we move out to fiscal 2021, we expect that we will be coming out of the lockdown and the economy starts getting back to work. And so the second half of the impact of the coronavirus shutdown will happen in fiscal year 2021. And again, we still have a pretty long runway all the way until June of 2021 for us to be able to make up those numbers. Hopefully we have reasonable collections in the latter half of the year, and that would also temper the loss in fiscal 2021. Next slide, please. So here are what the forecast scenarios look like. This particular slide shows you the length of disruption, which talks about if this recession would last, or the disruption will last for 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 months. Those are the columns across the top. And the disruption starts from March 15th. So you can see it would end May 15th, for instance. So this scenario is still possible if the federal government has its way and we open up April 30th. We could still come out of this by May 15th. So these are still valid scenarios. Looking at the scenarios, it goes from a COVID-only scenario, which means that there was an impact with no impending recession. There's a mild recession with a V-shaped recovery, a moderate recession with a V-shaped recovery, et cetera, as you go down. And the last one, just for comparative sake, is the Great Recession with a long U recovery. Back to baseline shows you when the economy normalizes itself. Now, what we did is based on the data that we had at the time, and so this is of last week, we assigned probabilities in terms of what we believe, which forecast would be most likely to happen. And as of last week, a 2-month disruption, so back to work by May 15th, with a moderate recession with a V-shaped recovery, had about a 15% chance of happening. So that would entail us losing about $51.9 million in sales tax revenue. Equally likely is that we would be closed down well into May and not get back to work until June 15th, and that the recession would take a little longer to get out of. And in that case, we would be losing about $81.6 million in sales tax revenue. This is the scenario when Hassan talked about planning for different scenarios. This is the one that we've started to work on planning towards. Now, of course, this could be changed. The green color gradient and the yellow you can see shows you what we believe the probability is right now of these scenarios coming true. The grayed out scenarios I don't believe are realistic at this time, given the information. So with that said, if you might, and I had to guess, and people keep asking me, well, what's the range? What do you believe is going to happen? I would say with 40% certainty that we're going to lose somewhere between $50 and $100 million in sales tax revenue, and with 75% certainty that we would lose somewhere between $50 and $200 million in revenue. Losing any more than that, I think, is still possible, but I give it less than 25% chance right now. Next slide. This is the last slide, and I just wanted to show you this. What we did here is we did a short-term 3-year forecast to show you what the impact would be on the actual dollar amounts and the percentage that would be lost in each of those years. And we translated that also to calendar year. And so this is helpful to people when they want to understand what they're hearing in the news when they present in calendar year. But the way that you read this, if you take a look at the blue numbers, I'll just go really quickly. Our forecast for 2020, fiscal year 2020, was $319 million. And the forecast for 21 was $328 million. If you look at scenario C, which was a 2-month disruption with the V-shaped recovery, our new forecast would have showed $297.5 million in fiscal 2020 for a loss of $21 million, 21.6, and we would have lost another $30.3 million in fiscal 2021 with revenues of $298.4 million. And you see that by fiscal 22, we would be back at our baseline. So with that, the number at the bottom of the screen shows you what the total revenue loss would be, and that would be $51.9 million. Okay, that's how you would read this chart. So if you believe that the length of the recession is going to be longer, you can move over by one table or one column, and that will give you what our new forecast looks like. And the bottom line gives you the total losses. Sometimes those occur past the 3 years that are shown on this table. So with that, this is the conclusion of my presentation. I just wanted to say that the situation is very fluid right now. We will continue to be collecting data. We will continue to refine the forecasts, and we will start to coalesce one number. And when we come out of this and we have an understanding of how we're coming out of it, we will reforecast the long-term sales tax revenue to see what type of impact it had on that. And that's the conclusion of my presentation. And I'll hand it back to the chair for any questions that he might have, or anyone might have.
Put this on hold and call that other person, and secretary wasn't available.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Ray. A lot of, I don't know if I call it a very educated crystal ball or something. I don't know. It's really hard, and I appreciate all the effort that you guys put into this. A lot of good information. First, before we call on any members with questions, check with the clerk again if there's any public comments on this item.
There are no public comments on this item, Chair.
Okay, thank you. By raised hands, anybody have any questions or comments that you'd like to raise with Ray while he's here? Let's see, I see a couple hands. Let's start with Mike Kenny.
Well, good morning, and thank you very much for the presentation. It's very thorough. How often are you updating? I guess you're continually updating, but how often are you publishing your updates?
So
weekly?
Right now, these numbers will be updated bi-weekly. We did them last Friday. We're planning on putting them out again in another week or so. And the reason is that there's so much changing right now that what I don't want to do is just create a bunch of data for the sake of creating data. And we certainly could update it every week, but I think if we updated it every 2 weeks, we're going to be able to start to see some type of trend occur in the data.
Okay. Yeah, well, again, thanks for the presentation. Just on a bookkeeping note, I believe I'm missing the last line of text from your slide. The bottom of the slide is cut off. Is anyone else having that? I can see a gray box and a little bit of red text and nothing else.
That's how I see it on my screen too. There actually is a line over there. I don't know, James, is that something you're in control of?
No, it's the aspect ratio, but we will publish the slides and we'll have that. So yeah, I noticed that as well. This is the first time I've seen that bottom slide portion cut off.
It essentially, that bottom line essentially is the total loss over the scenario, and those numbers could be found on the slide prior to that also. You can match up the scenarios, but we will get that out to you.
Thank you.
I would note that if you refer to the materials for the meeting that are available on the Sandag's website for the meeting, the slide deck is there, and the slide is whole in that format. If anybody wants to look at it after this meeting or look for it. Let's see. Thanks, Mike and Ray. I see member Stuart Halpern has his hand raised. I'll call on him.
Thanks, Kai. Stuart Halpern, Ray. Fabulous presentation. I just got 2 questions, but first I just want to say, that next to the last slide in particular is just really a fabulous visual portrayal of how to think about the sensitivities and the scenarios and the probabilities. So I just really love that slide. I think it was a brilliant visual portrayal. Yeah, that one really just fabulous.
Thank you.
2 questions I had. First, just for absolute clarity, the definition of what you're calling disruption are you defining disruption as the actual period of a stay-at-home order, or are you defining disruption a little bit more loosely in terms of, meaningful negative economic impact?
It's the former. So it's stay at home before people can start to be going back to work, when these stay-at-home orders are lifted. So we have kind of a 2-month or 2-week buffer on this. So it's kind of March 15th through, if like I said, like if the federal government is correct and we open April 15th, it takes us 2 weeks to kind of get going in the flow. that's kind of a 2-month disruption of the economy in that sense. So that's what I'm calling a disruption. Now, that doesn't talk about the length of the impending recession that's going to occur and the shape to recover. So
Right.
so that's where you start looking at, well, is it a V? Is it going to be a V long? Is it going to be a U? And the variables that I use to determine that have to do with, like, for instance, if they say, go back to work, no social distancing, no masks, no nothing, just be normal, well, then it's a V shape. We'll get back to work relatively quickly. But the more rules that are in place, you know, we have to take temperatures before we get on an elevator, or how do we get a person to, you know, we don't have any of the answers to these questions. If you are concerned about the length that it actually takes time to get back to normalcy, then what I would say is I would look at the shape of that recovery as being flatter. And so that's where those variables would be taken into account.
Great, thanks. And I know you probably did that definition up front. I just wanted to re-clarify it in my mind. But the second question is related to your second point, you know, and you made the point earlier about how this is a different scenario or situation than a typical purely economically driven recession. On that score, I'm curious if you or others have looked to 1957. We had a pretty serious pandemic here in the States where I think it was the H2N2 flu caused over 100,000 deaths. Has anybody been looking at that to get some hints as to what the consumer behavior might be analogous to this one?
We did not go back that far, but that is a very good point. I think that there's some information that also came out on the disruption due to the Spanish flu, and there were some studies done on the recovery of different areas based upon their initial response, and those areas that had more stringent lockdown orders actually economically recovered more quickly than those that didn't. So those are things we probably need to start taking a look at, but they weren't worked into this first set of assumptions.
Great, thank you.
All right, let's see, anybody else, any other committee members have a question or comment? I don't see any other raised hands.
Chairman, if I may, this is Hassan.
Yes.
Just comment, not to make Ray's head any bigger, but Ray's been, recognized for his work and sharing his work with the statewide audiences and national audiences. Just want you to know that his work obviously is amazing, at least what I saw, but he is being looked at as one of the few in the state who could do this kind of work.
Well, and thank you for those kind words, Hassan. It's really a team effort. I have a senior economist, Stephanie Gouchard, and Michelle Posada, who's my senior analyst, who are doing the bulk of the data collection and the modeling on this. So I very much appreciate it. We are taking this very seriously, and the others, and what Hassan is referring to is that the other self-help counties have requested that we share our model with them so that they can start to use it for their planning purposes also. So we shared that with them yesterday, and we will be doing a workshop with them to have them put their numbers into our model and be able to come out with this probability distribution based upon different scenarios.
Great, thanks. Yeah, thanks again for all the detailed information and what you're doing for this and willingness to be here and answer questions for us. Look forward to adjustments as we go. Hopefully we'll see some of the more positive scenarios play out. All right, well, let's move on. Thanks, Ray. Let's move on to agenda item number 6, which is actions by the Transportation Committee and Board of Directors on TransNet related items, probably since we last met, and I'll turn over to Ariana to give us an update.
Thank you, Chair Raymer. This is Ariana Zerneden. Good morning, everybody. So yes, as you mentioned, your last meeting was in February. However, the board of directors, as our executive director just mentioned, has met a couple times, and they did approve the RTCIP fee adjustment. Remember that that's the development impact fee required to be collected by local jurisdictions. And you reviewed that at your February meeting, and the board did approve that at its February meeting. And then in February, we also brought to you the TransNet program short-term revenue forecasts, and those were approved by the board in February as well. But as Hassan mentioned, we do anticipate bringing back a revised forecast in the next couple of months. And related to that, in March, the board was scheduled, again, as mentioned previously, to take action on its budget. And you may recall that we typically bring the TransNet portion of the capital budget to the ITAC about this time of year. However, the board did decide to postpone action on their budget to give staff time to return with an update given the potential COVID-19 impact. So we do anticipate bringing that TransNet portion of the budget to the ITAC at a meeting of the ITAC at a future date.
So,
and then finally added.
Ariana, if I may,
Yes.
just on that point, so the board did not act on the budget, which violated our bylaws, which we were supposed to have a draft budget out by April 1st. For that reason, our chief counsel office took to the board an item last month to change the bylaws so we're not violating that. And Amberlynn, if you want to just tell the committee what the action was with the board last week.
Happy to, Hassan. The action of the board last week was to add into the bylaws a little bit more flexibility on the presentation of a draft budget while still maintaining the adoption of a budget by the end of in June.
Okay, Ariana, did you have more to go, or?
Yeah, I do. I just have one final note. It seems we lost Amberlynn there, but at its meeting last week, the board did approve. Yeah, so it seems that the board did approve a waiver of review for time extension amendments on TransNet grant programs. So you'll recall that for TransNet grants, grantees sometimes ask for extensions, and then the ITAC is asked to consider those for recommendation. The board was asked to waive policy advisory committee review of time extension amendments for TransNet grant program grantees that are unable to perform under their current schedule due to COVID-19. And that delegated the authority to approve these extensions to the executive director. And this is a temporary waiver, so these extension requests would come back at a future date. And those are the updates that I have for you today.
Okay, thank you. Following procedure here, I'm going to ask the clerk again if there are any public comments on the item.
There are no public comments on this item.
Okay, thank you. Any of our members have any questions or comments for Ariana on what she presented? Okay, I'm not seeing any. So let's go ahead and move on. Thank you, Ariana. Let's go ahead and move on to item 7, which is the fiscal year 2021 TransNet Triennial Performance Audit Draft Scope of Work. And there's a recommendation that we approve the draft coming up, and I'm again turn to Ariana to present the item to us, and we're asked ultimately to approve draft scope of work at this.
Sure, I'll go ahead and provide a quick overview. In October at your meeting, the ITAC appointed members Stuart Halper and Greg Sadowski and Brad Barnum, in addition to Tracy Drager, to serve on its fiscal year 21 performance audit subcommittee to draft a scope of work for consideration by the ITAC. The draft scope is proposed to include a more narrowed focus than in prior years that leverages prior audit results and minimizes review of areas that have been extensively evaluated under prior audits. And this narrowed focus was recommended during the last audit. The proposed draft audit proposes taking a closer look at assessing the potential unintended consequences of recent Board of Directors governance changes mandated by Assembly Bill 805. It also proposes to review efforts to respond to negative trends in bicycle and pedestrian safety statistics reported during the last performance audit. And then finally, it also proposes to evaluate TransNet Regional Bikeway Early Action Program progress and cause of delays. Upon approval by the ITOC, staff would work to issue the notice to proceed to the ITOC performance auditor. Your subcommittee also is proposing accelerating the begin date by a month or so. So instead of starting in July, work would begin in May sometime, and then we would use fiscal year 2020 ITOC funds set aside for consultant work. Your auditors will continue working with your subcommittee during the upcoming fiscal year and return with a draft performance audit report at your March 2021 meeting. And today, the ITOC is asked to approve the proposed audit scope of work for its upcoming fiscal year 2021 TransNet triennial performance audit.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, let's start with, ask again the clerk if there's any public comments on this item.
There are no public comments on this item.
Okay, thank you. Do any of the subcommittee members or members at large on our committee have any questions or comments to add or question what Ariana presented? The draft is in the packet, the detailed, let's see, not seeing any questions at the moment. Oh, let's see, it looks like Brad has a comment or question. Let's recognize Brad Barnum.
Not a question. I was just going to make a motion to approve the draft, if that's what we want to do.
Oh, yeah, we're, okay, well, that was the next step, so, okay. So we have a motion to approve the draft. Let's see, I would be looking then for a second. Recognize Dustin Fuller.
I second the motion.
All right, any other hands for any comments or questions before we take a vote? Not seeing any. Okay, I'll call on the clerk to take a roll call vote.
Chair Kai Raymer.
Approve.
Vice Chair Michael Kenny.
Approve.
Brad Barnum.
Approve.
Dustin Fuller.
Approve.
Stuart Halpern.
Approve.
And Greg Sadowski.
Approved.
Item 7 passes unanimously.
Okay, thank you. We'll move next to item 8A, which is the fiscal year 2019 TransNet fiscal and compliance audits, initial findings and recommendations. I think at this point, the goal of this, I guess, is that we're asked to accept the draft of the auditor's report so that it can be presented to the Transportation Committee this Friday. So with that, I think we have Andre. Is Andre present to give an overview or to introduce this?
Yes, good morning, Chair Raymer and members of the committee. This is Andre Dujon, the CFO for Sandag. And as you mentioned, Chair, there's two items in front of you today. Item 8A is the draft audit, which Jennifer Farr will present. We'll look for a recommendation for that, and then we'll go to item 8B, which is the exception that we had, and we'll also be looking for a recommendation there. So the ordinance requires ITOC to conduct an annual fiscal and compliance audit of TransNet recipients. We are on the final stages of the audit, and the ITOC's auditor, Jennifer Farr, is here to present results of the draft audits to date. So Jennifer, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
There we go. Good morning, everybody. I was waiting to be unmuted. This is Jennifer Farr. Good morning, committee. I just have some comments regarding the draft report. We performed the agreed upon procedures of the 24 agencies, including 18 cities, the County of San Diego, MTS, NCTD, SANDAG, Caltrans, and ITOC. Our fieldwork was performed by our team of auditors between September of 2019 and December of 2019. There are 7 major areas of review that are summarized in the report that's in your agenda. I'm going to go through each of them and give you the results of each of the areas. The first area is testing of expenditures. We selected at least 25% of total expenditures for testing to determine that they're included in the RTIP and are eligible cost. And if you recall, this year we added a new procedure to test payroll transactions if payroll expenditures exceeded 20% of the total cost. And as a result, we tested payroll transactions for 6 agencies this year, whereas in the past we would have not selected those expenditures for testing. There are 4 agencies in process of obtaining approval for inter-project transfers, and we had no instances of non-compliance with our expenditure testing. The second area is on maintenance of effort. We compared the discretionary expenses reported on the state street report to the maintenance of effort base amount to determine if the local agencies spent at least the maintenance of effort base. And we found that all agencies were in compliance with those requirements. If you recall, there were 2 agencies with shortfalls last year. That was San Marcos and Del Mar. And we followed up and ensured that both agencies had incurred expenses sufficient to cover the prior year shortfalls and also the current year requirements. The third area is the 30% SANDAG board policy rule to determine whether agencies maintained a balance of no more than 30% of their annual apportionment. All agencies were in compliance except for the cities of Imperial Beach and Poway. In those situations, the funding will be deferred until the cities are in compliance with the 30% rule. The fourth section relates to the percentage of revenue spent on congestion relief projects versus maintenance projects. And we're testing to ensure that the congestion relief projects, there was no more than 30% used on the maintenance projects. And we noted no exceptions as a result of that testing. We additionally looked at cumulative local street and road revenue expended for maintenance to determine that it was cumulatively under the 30%. And we had no exceptions. There are 3 agencies that are fairly close. That's the cities of Lemon Grove, Poway, and the city of San Diego that are in the 28 to 29% range. But no one is over the 30% at this point. The fifth area is our testing of the Regional Transportation Congestion Improvement Program. For this testing, we ensured that the agencies collect the approved exaction fee, tracked those fees properly, and spent the fee revenue on approved projects. We did have 3 exceptions where the agencies did not collect the required exaction fees. Those were for the cities of Coronado, Lemon Grove, and National City. And on the expenditure testing, we tested 10% of expenditures to determine if they were for eligible cost and noted no exceptions. And similarly, we tested payroll expenditures if they exceeded 20% of cost, and that resulted in testing 4 agencies for payroll expenditures, and we had no exceptions with that testing. As I mentioned last year during our meeting, there are several agencies that have unspent revenues for over 7 years. And we had suggested, and you approved, that we include a footnote this year explaining the status of those projects, and that has been included. We also tested for whether or not expenditures for fund administration were less than 3%. And we did find the city of Oceanside originally had expenditures in excess of 3%, and we subsequently worked with them to reduce those expenditures to stay within the limit. And all of the agencies provided the RTCIP schedule for our review by December 1st, which is a requirement. The sixth section is on transit operator eligibility. We ensured that over the prior year, the total operating cost per vehicle hour for bus and revenue vehicle mile for rail services did not increase greater than the increase in CPI. For the period testing, the CPI increase was 2.43%. And we found that NCTD was not in compliance with the rail operator eligibility. Their operating cost per revenue vehicle mile had increased by 12.98%. And that is the item that we'll be discussing in 8B, I believe. And the seventh and last section is our testing of indirect cost. We noted there was 12 agencies that allocated indirect costs to the program. For those agencies, the percentage of indirect cost charged ranged from less than 1% to a little under 13%. There were 4 agencies that had indirect cost rates approved by a cognizant agency, and other agencies had either internally developed their indirect cost policies or a consultant had prepared them. And if you recall, this year we used a questionnaire to obtain a better understanding of the methodology, and that definitely was helpful in figuring out what the approval process was and what the indirect cost rate plans looked like. So the results of all of our procedures and a detail of all of the findings that I mentioned are included in each agency's management responses, and they're found in the individual draft reports. And we plan to finalize the reports within 60 days after today's meeting per the ordinance requirements. So with that, I will turn it back over to Andre and to the committee to see if there are any questions.
Great, thank you, Jennifer. So we have some additional steps to close out the audit process. The first is the next agenda item, 8B, which we are asking for your recommended approval, which then goes to TC this Friday and ultimately the board approval on May 22nd. Our Chair Keimer is scheduled to present results of the draft audit to the TC this Friday as well. And as Jennifer mentioned, there's a 60-day period between TC review and issuance of the audits, which allows the auditors time for any final changes to the reports. Although the ITALC is scheduled to consider the final drafts for acceptance at the June meeting, that date may change. So results of this audit are incorporated into your annual report, which is scheduled for your consideration in June, and Chair Amer is scheduled to present the 2020 ITALC annual report to the board on June 26th. So our recommendation today for 8A is the ITALC is asked to accept the draft independent auditor's report on results of the agreed upon procedures, including initial findings and recommendations for presentation to the Transportation Committee on April 17th, 2020. So at this point, I'll turn it back to the chair if you have any questions. And once we get through that, we'll get back to 8B. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Andre and Jennifer. Or let's see. First of all, I guess I keep almost skipping this. I need to ask the clerk again if there are any public comments on the item.
There are no public comments on this item.
Okay, thank you. Any members that have any questions for Andre or Jennifer Farr on the item? Seeing none, do I have a motion on this item as stated by Andre in terms of the recommendation, the motion we need? I call it Stuart.
Yes, Stuart Halpern, I move to approve.
Okay, do I have a second? Call on Dustin Fuller.
Second the motion.
Thank you, Dustin. We have a motion and a second. Any other member comments before we take a vote? Okay, seeing none, I'll call on the clerk to take a roll call vote.
Chair Kai Raymer,
Approve?
Vice Chair Michael Kenny,
Approve.
Brad Barnum,
Approve.
Dustin Fuller,
Approve.
Stuart Halpern,
Approve.
Greg Sadowski.
Approve.
Item 8A passes unanimously.
Okay, thank you. That'll move us to the related item 8B, which is the fiscal year 2019 TransNet Extension Ordinance funding eligibility request that we have as a companion to this item. Andrea, I'll turn it over to you to present this item. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Chair. So, as you heard in the last report, one of the auditor's procedures is to check compliance of various ordinance requirements of the transit operators and local jurisdictions so they may continue receiving their annual transit allocations. For the fiscal year 2019 audit, NCTD report has an unmet requirement needing additional steps to cure. On an annual basis, the ordinance requires the transit operators to hold costs for both bus and rail services to CPI, which is used as a measure to help keep costs reasonable year over year. The CPI used is for the San Diego County transportation specific, and there was an increase of 2.43% in fiscal year 2019, and NCTD exceeded that increase for its rail operations. The ordinance takes into consideration years in which this occurs and provides a few options for board consideration. 1, the transit operators may exclude certain unforeseen costs. 2, may use an average over a 3-year period. Or 3, they may use a combination of the two methods. NCTD is asking to exclude certain costs resulting from an adjustment from actuarial estimates for NCTD's CalPERS pension liability, other post-employment benefits healthcare plan, third-party claim liabilities, and workers' compensation reserves liability. These types of exclusions have been requested in the past and have been approved by the board. So we have a recommendation with this item. ITALC is asked to 1, consider the transit funding eligibility request of NCTD, and 2, make a recommendation to the Board of Directors acting as the San Diego County Regional Transportation Commission regarding this request. Now we have a representative from NCTD, the CFO, Yoon Park, on the line today, and we are available for any further questions you may have. So I'll turn it back to the chair for further discussion or a recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Andre. First order before we move to committee comments or questions is any public comments on the item? I'll ask the clerk again.
There are no public comments on this item.
Okay, thank you. So any of the committee members have questions or comments either for Andre or North County Transit Director? I recognize Michael Kenny. Member Michael.
Thanks, Kai. This is directed to either of you, whoever could answer it. In reviewing the letter from NCTD, I saw the paragraph which referenced the cost overrun source, but there wasn't any explanation and didn't mention whether this was a continuing problem that we might experience in the future. Can you elaborate a little bit on, I guess, on paragraph 2 of the letter, what happened?
Good morning, members of the ITALC. This is Yoon. I am the CFO for the North County Transit District. Every year, the CalPERS prepares a valuation report of our pension liability. And within that calculation, there are a range of estimates that factor in the valuation. These are just this is for the most part what we're requesting is cash accounting entries that are booked in our financial statements. They're reported as expenses, but NCTD has not actually paid any of that liability. Eventually, as we fund the plan and as we make those payments for the unfunded accrued liability, then that's when the estimates materialize. And we have captured the cash payments. What we are requesting is that all those expenses that were recorded in our financial records that have no impact on cash and can change year over year based on CalPERS estimates. A few examples are, for example, there is an interest component that is incorporated in the evaluation. There's also assumptions as far as related to investment return. So NCTD as an agency will have no control on determining what that interest rate or that return investment is going to be. However, because we have to true up our books based on that valuation, it has an impact financially, in our financial statements, basically. So yes, it can fluctuate. There's years where it has been the other way around. Actually, as a matter of fact, 2 years ago, it went the other way around. We actually caused a reduction on an expenses. So it changes year over year.
Well, thank you for clarifying.
Okay, any other committee members with comments, questions, clarifications? Otherwise, I would be looking for a motion on this item as, I guess, as outlined by Andre in terms of what the ITAC is asked to do today in terms of our recommendation. Member Kenny?
I'd make a motion to support the recommendations, I guess. Is that what we're being asked to do here?
I would, if it's unchanged, Andre had read recommendation of a motion that's on the record. If you want a motion to make that recommendation unchanged, that would be the.
Thanks for the help. I'd like to make a motion to adopt the language that Andre put forward with no changes.
Thanks, Mike. Member Halpern?
I will second the motion.
All right, thank you. Last call for any comments or questions. We have a motion and a second. Let's see. Okay, I'll call on the clerk to take a roll call vote.
Chair Kai Raymer.
Approve the motion.
Vice Chair Michael Kenny.
Approve.
Brad Barnum.
Approve.
Dustin Fuller.
Approve.
Stuart Halpern.
Approve.
Greg Sadowski.
Approved.
Item 8B passes unanimously.
Okay, thank you, Andre and Jennifer and Yun, for all the presentation and clarifications on the last couple items. We will move on now to item number 9, I'm sorry, I'm lost my place, which is our draft concepts of the 2020 Independent Taxpayer Oversight Committee annual report. I think we have Julie Barajas here to kind of present the item and give us some of the draft comments or concepts, I mean.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yep. Thanks.
Okay, great. So it's been a while since we've met, so I'd just like to remind everybody that in February ITALC meeting, the ITALC members appointed Dustin Fuller, Michael Kenny, and Stuart Halpern to the 2020 Annual Report Subcommittee. The subcommittee has prepared some draft concepts for your annual report. There's still some areas in the report that need to be worked on, and we've put some placeholders there. We've included a copy for your review as attachment 1 to this report. The subcommittee is proposing to focus on 3 main areas: the status of the TransNet program accomplishments and development of the 2021 regional plan, a look forward with respect to the scope of the next triennial performance audit, and the TransNet budget amendment approved by the Board of Directors at its September 2019 meeting. The subcommittee is anticipated to return with a second draft for your ITALC review at its May meeting. And approval of the final annual report is currently scheduled for the June 20 ITALC and Board of Directors meeting, again in late June. Today we're asking for any comments, any areas where you feel that might need additional information, or other areas, or maybe a direction that the subcommittee didn't touch on that you'd like to see included in the report. So with that, I'll leave it open to the committee for any comments.
Okay, thank you, Julie. First, just to cover off on if there's any public comments on the item.
Sorry, there are no public comments on this item.
Okay, thank you. Before I guess I've asked if any members have any questions or comments, and while I'm waiting to see hands, I have a question just on bookkeeping or whatever. I don't know what we call it, but we have the report's going to be issued in June or later, and there are terms. There's a selection going on to replace a vacant and termed out myself and Dick Wortman's seat, and then there's potentially I think there's a re-up potentially being considered for another seat. I guess with some of these things that get potentially changed in May, do we need to do anything different with this ultimately in terms of who's listed or things? I mean, or do we, it's just a report for the year we just did and we just leave it with the committee as is?
So there is a listing on the front page that lists the committee members. As of right now, there aren't any planned changes because this basically covers the year ending in June. So I don't think there's going to be any large turnover. We may have a new appointee and member in May for the CEO position, but that's really not going to affect this report.
I guess maybe it's more, so the reports, like the letter from the chair is coming from me, and when this is issued, I will no longer be the chair, which is fine with me just to leave it the way it is. I just want to make sure that makes sense to everybody. Because I'm termed out in a month.
So if I haven't heard any comments, we've planned to proceed as normal.
Okay. It's just a question. I'm fine with it. I just throwing it out there to see if it all makes sense for folks. Okay. All right. Thank you. Let's see. I see Member Halpern has his hand raised. Let's start with him. Need to unmute Stuart if we can.
There we go.
There we go.
Just with regard to you terming out, it wasn't completely clear if we will or won't have a replacement by then. If we, for some reason, do not, do we have a provision that a member whose term expires can continue until a successor is found?
We actually, the language is pretty clear. We just had a discussion on that, that none of the terms can be extended beyond what they were appointed for. However, we do have language in the ordinance which states that the vice chair would assume responsibilities for the chair when he is unavailable. So in this case, it would be the vice chair to present the final reports to both the ITALC and to the Board of Directors in June.
Got it. Thank you.
Sounds great. Okay. Any other, thanks for the clarification. That was kind of along the lines of what I was trying to sort through too. Any other members with comments or questions on the draft at this point?
So I think that, you know, we're pretty much looking for comments or any other direction on what you would like to be included in the draft, or if you're perfectly fine with how it is.
Remind me, we would have opportunity to see this one more time.
Yes.
May.
In May, and then the final in June.
Okay.
With hopefully no revision in June.
So, well, let me propose that. So, if absent any other comments right here on the spot, I guess just I'll ask the members, my co-committee members, to you know, to make sure and take a look at it and think through and be prepared for, you know, a last good shot at this at our next meeting, so that we can be prepared to, you know, have a final that doesn't have a lot of last minute revisions. So let's see, any other, okay, I see Brad has his hand raised. Let's call Brad and
the question is, with the COVID issue, is it overlapping at all on this that we need to mention anything about that, or?
There is some small mentions in the chair's letter, I believe in the special note as well, kind of addressing that the COVID is presenting some challenges, but at this time we can't really elaborate on too much on the impacts.
I'm looking at it on Kai's part, but I may have missed that. Let me see.
Yeah, we have addressed some of the COVID in the annual report.
Okay, no, that's fine. For some reason I'm trying to find that part where it was, but I just curious.
Brad, this is Kai. In the third to last paragraph, the end of I guess last sentence or two of the third to last paragraph, it talks about at the time of publication, the impact is.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you.
And we, you know, I suppose in a month or something, we may choose, we can evaluate whether we change that language or not.
Right.
Depending on if we know different or what we know.
Right. And in the meantime, you know, I know this is kind of, maybe you need a little more time to stew on the ideas of how you'd like to see things reported in the annual report. You could always email myself or Ariana to give some additional suggestions or feedback beyond this meeting.
Yeah, great. That sounds good. Okay. Any other member comments or clarifications, or everything good to move forward? I don't see any hands raised. Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Julie, and we'll, like you said, if independently, if people have thoughts or comments, send them to Julie, and otherwise we will revisit this at our next meeting. So let's move on to item 10, which is the implementation of the fiscal year 2018, the 2018 triennial performance audit recommendations and how those are going. And Ariana, are you the lead on this one to present?
Yes, and I'm here. So,
okay.
Yeah. So you're familiar with this report. We usually bring this a couple times a year. It's the usual report on the status of implementation of recommendations from your last performance audit, your most recent performance audit, which you conducted in fiscal year 2018. And we're including the usual recommendation matrix, and we've also included a more condensed visual summary, which you may have noticed we inserted into your annual report as well. And that's for your review today. And since the last time we reported, we haven't completed any of additional recommendations, but staff does continue making progress implementing the recommendations from the last audit. And staff usually provides updates, as I mentioned, twice a year. So our plan is to come back with another update in about 6 months. And just as a reminder, your upcoming performance audit, one of the first tasks that your auditors will do on your behalf is to review the progress in implementing these recommendations. And with that, if you have any questions, I'm here.
Okay, thank you. And there were a report or the attachments in the item that had the detailed status. Let's see. Well, first I'll ask the clerk again if there's any public comments on the item.
There are no public comments on this item.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to ask if any of the members of the committee have any questions or comments on the item. For raised hands. Okay, seeing none, this was an information item. We don't need to take a vote, so I will propose that we, let's see, we'll move on to item 11. Thank you, Ariana. Item 11 is the 2018 RTIP amendment number 11. And it's a discussion item on the agenda, and I believe we have Richard Radcliffe. Is he on? I don't have the list right up. Richard, are you available to present the item?
Richard's on. Can you hear me okay? There we go.
Oh, there you go. Yep, thanks.
Sorry about that. Okay, good morning, Chair and ITALK members. My name is Richard Radcliffe, and I'm a financial analyst with the TransNet department. I'm here today. It's been a couple of months since we've been to the ITALK with RTIP amendment. I'm here this morning with Amendment 11 to the 2018 Regional Transportation Improvement Program, or RTIP. Amendment 11 is being processed as an administrative modification. And on April 17th, the SANDAG Executive Director, under delegated authority, is expected to approve the amendment. The ITALK is being asked to review and discuss the projects in the proposed amendment, focusing their review on the TransNet funded projects. Attachment 1 on page 572 of the agenda is the summary of changes report showing the prior and revised project cost, the cost difference, and the % change in each project. This report is sorted by the absolute value of the change amount in the total programmed amount, with the projects showing the greatest change in dollars at the top. Examples of changes included in this amendment include the transfer of funds from various bike projects to the Inland Rail Trail and the transfer of funds to the South Bay BRT. In attachment 2, table 2 of your backup, beginning on page 576 of the agenda, you will find the changes proposed in the amendment specifically for those projects funded with TransNet. This concludes my report, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Okay, thanks, Richard. Let's see, first I'll again ask the clerk if there's any public comments on the item.
There are no public comments on this item.
Thank you. And we will move to member comments or questions. And while I look for hands raised on the screen, I have a question, Richard. If I'm understand, like there's a couple, I guess it's in attachment 1 where there's a couple of projects that are struck, but is that like moving funds that were like in Chula Vista Bikeway designed to Inland Rail, and it's a shift from one agency to another, but this or what's the background there?
Those are actually, we had to remove those from the amendment. If you look at CHV 70, for example, it should be the one towards the top of that table there that struck through. That one didn't catch it immediately, but it has too large of an increase to the overall cost of the project, so it was disqualified from the admin mod. And it was also, the changes on that one were also impacting the other project that was removed, the CHV 85, towards the bottom of that same page. So that's why those were removed. It was just because the change was too large to go in this admin mod. But those projects have been moved to the TransNet POP update, which is Amendment 14.
Okay, so they didn't go away. They just moved to a process that they triggered a need for a more robust process and in a different amendment.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, thank you. Any committee members have any other questions or comments for Richard? I don't see any. This again was a discussion item, so I think, let's see. I guess we're good on this one then, correct? Thanks, Richard.
Yeah, thank you.
For the item. Thanks for being here. Thanks. Okay. Let's see where we are. Is that the last agenda item?
Yes, and there are no continued public comments.
Okay. Any members have any final comments on anything? Otherwise, with that, our next meeting is scheduled for May 13th. I believe, I expect we might have a similar situation in terms of how the meeting gets run, but we'll stay tuned for that. I really appreciate again this from my perspective and all the staff between getting set up for this meeting and preparing the presentations and doing the presentations remote, and then the committee members, your participation, and was going into it. Was a few weeks ago when we said we were going to do this, I was apprehensive, but this seemed to work really well, and appreciate there's a lot of efforts on the Sandag staff part and all the folks that work to prepare the materials and keep things moving in these tougher times. Hope everybody stays healthy and well, and with that, the meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee members. See you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.